Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm MrTieDye. Today we're going to do the dreamcatcher. So I've had a bunch of requests for it, so I decided to get in and get it tied up. So I'm starting with a tea that's been soaked in soda ash. It's been spun out so it's just barely damp, and then I've turned it inside out just to make centering the tea easier. I center it by tucking one sleeve in the other, so I got both sleeves over here. And I have the front and the back separate from each other because we're going to work on just the front today. So I do have a video, I'll put a link to it down below, of how I do the centering, the tucking of the sleeve into one side. So to start with, we're going to just move the back side of the t-shirt back out of our way here. And then I just try to smooth everything out so that the part that I am working on is nice and smooth here. And then what I've done is I put a little mark on here. I'm going to have the top of my dreamcatcher come up to about 3 fingers from the collar here. So I've just put a little mark right there. The next thing is determining how big of a dreamcatcher we want. So basically I'm looking at the seam of the arm over here. And as I put this measuring tape on here, if I do 6 inches out, which would give me a 12-inch dreamcatcher, I'm a couple inches away from the sleeve here. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is from the dot where I want the top of my dreamcatcher, I'm going to measure down 6 inches, and I'm going to put another dot. That'll be the center where we're going to work from here. So there is that. And then the next thing, for the dreamcatcher, I use sinew, and with the sinew you need to be able to pull it really tight, and that's not something that you can do by hand. You really need some sort of a holder, and this is one of the sinew dowels that I got from Nikolai Saving. He puts links up whenever he has these for sale over on one of the tie-dye pages, but this here works really awesome for that. It gives me enough sinew on there and that I can grip that and hold it to pull really tight. So, but you do need something that you can pull, because this is a design that you need to pull it very tight with. So what I'm going to do to start out with is draw the circle of how big I want the dreamcatcher to be. So I do that by making a circle on here, a half circle. I just tie a little slip knot, attach my pin to it, and then I use my pin here. So I'm going to put my finger down on this first dot here in the center, and then I'm going to stretch my sinew up until I reach the second dot. That's the one that I have at 6 inches. Once I get there, then I just hold the pin, the sinew line tight, and then I can draw my half circle on. Okay, so there's the first part. I'll set that aside for now, and let's see, get a different pencil out here. The next thing is we need to fold this up here. So what I'm going to do is draw some lines on here. So I'm going to put my 60-degree angle, and you can also do this with a protractor. It's just a matter of putting wherever you're starting there from the center and line up your 60 degrees. So I'm going to put a 60-degree line on here. So if you have one of these angles, then you just line up the flat side along the t-shirt here. And then with your washable marker, you're just going to draw from that center dot there, draw your line out. Now I'm going to move this over, and on this one here I'm going to go with the 90-degree corner. So I'm lining the flat edge once again up along this edge here. And line that up until I got the same mark. So I'm just going to draw that line all the way up. And now we're going to flip the thing around here, and we're going to draw another 60-degree line. So all the lines are coming right out of this center spot here. So this here's lined up flat on the bottom, and there's my 60-degree angle once again. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fold this edge here up, and we're going to lay it right along this line here. So you can hold your finger here at the center spot, grab this edge here, and just flip that up. Line that up, and as I smooth this out, I'm kind of feeling here to make sure that I don't have any creases or wrinkles in there. And if I do, then I can just reach in there with my finger and just kind of smooth those back out again. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to line this edge up with this. Oh wait, getting ahead of myself. Let's flip this one under. So basically what I'm going to do is pinch here, and I'm going to flip this underneath so that I'm lining this edge up with this line right here, the 90-degree line. So just reach up here so that you're holding all of the layers. Pick up down here so you're holding the layers, and then flip that under. So that outer edge is lined up right here now, and then like I say, the other line that we have is lined up, so I have two creases here now. So I smooth everything out, make sure everything is lined up the way I want it, and then we're going to fold this line over. So we're going to put this edge right along this line here, this here being in the crease. And now we can pick this whole thing up. So I'm grabbing right here at the center and up here, make sure I have all the layers. Lay this down flat. And I line up so that I have that other drawn line right there on the edge next to the other. So I got these three edges all lined up there together. And now we're going to take this last edge and fold it over here. And once again, making sure that all of your edges are nice and flat in there. So as you feel this here, if you feel a wrinkle in there, then you can just lift that up, reach in with your fingers, and just kind of smooth just by pushing into that little crease there. That'll smooth things out. Okay, now through the t-shirt I can see my circle line, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that in. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is this is where we're going to start with the sinew at. So what I'm going to do is, well, I guess I can start, sometimes I'll start with the slip knot. And that might be the easiest way to start this. So I tie a slip knot in there. The other thing, you could just wrap it around, but sometimes starting with the slip knot is the easiest because you can get it lined up where you want it. Right above the line there. And now I'm going to do just little accordion folds along that line there. So once I have my accordion folds along that line, now I have my slip knot in place and ready to go. So now I can pull that, tighten that up there just how I want it. And I'm making sure that I'm keeping all of my creases flat here. And then I'm going to wrap around a couple times, and I pull some of the slack out there just to tighten it up a little bit more. So I'm just putting my hand there to hold that in place, and then I'm pulling back here. And I'm pulling down low so that if perchance this sinew breaks and my hand slips away, then it's just going to go back behind me. If you pull up towards your face and this breaks, then you punch yourself in the face, and that's no fun, believe me. So now once I've tied the initial slack out of there, I wrap it around a few more times, tighten it up, and then a few more times. I just find that if I have it wrapped around there 6 or 7, 8 times, then you get a better white line. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is tie another line just kind of straight across, just like that. I have maybe a 1/2 inch of space there. Zoom in just a little bit, and I'll tighten that up a little bit. Wrap that around a few times, tighten that a couple more times. Okay, so now this here is the outer ring of my dream catcher here. So I like to put that. You don't have to put this gap in there. I like to put that extra gap. So now the next ones that we're going to do, we're going to go at an angle. But before we start, I like to make sure that all of my folds are still lined up here, nice and neat on top of each other. So you can kind of just straighten those out. On this side here, I have a little skinny fold, 2 thicker folds, and another skinny fold. And on this side, I have 3 thick folds. It just happens to be the way I'm holding it. If you flip it over, then of course you'd have 3 thick folds. But the main thing is that you have that number of folds going into this. So now what I'm going to do is go across at an angle. So the first time I went straight across, because that's going to form another little circle there. There'll be 2 circles next to each other. This here is where we're going to get the dream catcher. So I'm going off at an angle here. I'm going to wrap that under. And I usually will wrap it a couple times. And then I'm holding my fingers down on this here as I'm pulling back. And as I'm doing that, it's creating some creases here. And that's what you want to see go on there. So you just keep pulling until that's kind of tight. And then I'll wrap it around a couple more times. And then that's when I hold it and pull it really tight. And you can kind of feel the slack come out of it. And at some point, there's no more slack to come out. And that's usually when you're done there. And then I'll wrap it around just a couple more times. Like I said, I just found that wrapping several times gives me a nice white line, which for the dream catcher, that's what we're wanting. Okay, so the first time we went over, so now the next time we're going to come under. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm coming at an angle, going across here, underneath. And we're just, like I say, zigzagging back and forth. So now I'm going to line this back up right where we tied off the first one. I'll wrap around 2 times. And then once again, we're going to hold down right here and pull. But just kind of pull slowly to take that slack out, and just keep pulling on that. I'm going to pull it tight, and then I'm going to wrap a couple more times. And then, like I say, I stop every now and then to make sure that all my creases are still lined up, because if your creases go cattywampus on you, then that's going to shift the shape of your dream catcher. So just make sure. So now, like I say, we zigzag this way. So now we're going to come back. Oh, we're going to go across this way. So we go over the top, and then we come under the bottom, and then over the top again. We just go back and forth as we zigzag down to the bottom. Okay, so once I have that where I want it, I wrap around twice, hold down, pull tight. And at this point, I like to stop and just make sure once again, because the more you pull on this, the more that these little creases want to move around on you. So I'm just continuing to check on that as we go down towards the tip here. That all my folds are still lined up there. And they're just a little bit off, so I'm just trying to straighten them back out. And as I'm squeezing this, the excess soda ash that's in here is coming out. That's what I keep wiping up. I like to have, whenever I'm really wanting to make sure I have white lines, I don't spin my shirts out for quite as long, so they're a little bit wetter than a normal tee that I usually like it almost dry. But with these here, I like them just slightly damp, so there's a little bit of a variation there. But having a little bit of water trapped underneath the sinew here helps keep the dye from wanting to go under there. So after I get this tied up, I'm going to set it aside for 2 or 3 days, let it dry out. But underneath the sinew, that water is going to stay trapped under there, unless you let it sit for 6 months or something. But leaving it sit for a couple days lets it dry out most of the way, but there will still be a little bit of water under, a little bit of if I could talk, a little bit of soda ash underneath the sinew, which is going to help prevent the rest of the dye from creeping under there, which will then give you the white lines that you're looking for with this design. And one of the main things, I try to make sure that when I'm wrapping this up in all these little creases here, I'm trying to line all of these up so that they're right on top of the other. If there's too much of a gap in here, then you'll have a gap, little gaps in your dreamcatcher. So I just try to make sure that I'm lining those up as nice and even as I can right on the other sinew line as I'm pulling and tying, just so that they're lapped right on top of each other. And it just takes a little bit of practice, so just stick with it and you'll get it. And then I go all the way down to the tip with these. And this last one is a little bit harder to get it quite as close, and I try not to pull the very tip quite as hard. I've had some where I pulled them really hard to get that white line in there, but then I end up with just a little bit of almost like a nipple with the shirt. If you stretch the shirt out too much, sometimes it won't go back to its regular shape. Okay, so there is the dreamcatcher part of the tee. So I'm going to tie this off. I usually like to put just a little bit of a knot in the end of this, just so that keeps the sinew. This is the one I know that I'm going to untie. This other one here, I can clip that off now because I don't need that on there. And there is the dreamcatcher part. So this here is the outer ring, and then this here is going to be all of the little shapes inside, all the lines inside the dreamcatcher. And let's see, for the back, what do we want to tie on the back? Okay, I decided to put a dreamcatcher heart on the back of the tee. So what I'm going to do, use my little stencil here. And since we centered the tee, I have the front and the back centered and separated from each other. So now I can fold this other one right on the back here. So we're going to just mark this off and then tie it up with the sinew, and then we're going to do the same type of thing. We're going to zigzag down the edges of the heart here. And it'll give us a dreamcatcher-y look to the heart. Okay, so once I get this all folded up, then the next thing that I want to do is tie right along that heart line there. And it's also good to make sure that the little peak, the center part of your heart, make sure you don't lose that little fold there. So I make sure to adjust that to make sure it's nice and included here in this initial sinew tie. So I usually will just hold that Like I say, you can also tie the slip knot like I did before, but you can also just wrap it around, and if you just overlap it over top of the sinew, then when you pull that tight, like I say, I kind of try to hold that in place as I'm pulling some of that slack. Oh, I didn't wrap it enough times. Alright, let's try that again. And if you need to, you can take that little line, excess line, wrap it underneath just to make sure that as you're pulling, it's going to tighten up right against itself. So I try to hold, like I say, all that in place as I take the slack out, and then you can wrap it really tight and hold that and give it a good pull just to really tighten it up. Alright, now the next thing I like to do is try to straighten some of these creases out from the heart here, and just try to get everything laying in there kind of flat, almost accordion folded in there. You don't have to be, this doesn't have to be perfect. I just like to try to have it just kind of laying as flat as possible in there. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just zigzag back and forth up the heart the same way. So I'll usually wrap it a couple times just to pull some of that slack out. And then wrap it a few more times and pull it tight. There is the heart up the back. This here is the line that we're going to pull the sinew off with. So I use tie a knot just so I can keep that one straight, and then I can trim these excess little hunks of sinew off of there so I don't get confused on which line I'm supposed to be pulling. Okay, the rest of the tee I'm just going to scrunch it up. So I'm going to start with the arms of the tee, and you can just scrunch those right into their own armhole here. Well, let's try another thing here. So what I'm doing, I have all four arms, or 4 layers, but I have the 2 arms lined up here together. So let's do a little bit of a tie on those. So this here is the top of the sleeve here. So let's just do a little bit more dreamcatcher stuff here. This here is just off of the sleeve. Okay. Oh, I need more sinew on my thing here. So the handy dandy thing about these sinew dowels, they have this little hex head on there, and they come ready to fit right onto your power drill here. So what I usually will do is I take my big roll of sinew, and I'll toss it down into a bucket here. Let's toss it down over here. So this is just a little bonus feature here of this sinew dowel, and how awesome they work. I tie a little knot in there. And just like that, I have another dowel ready to go with my sinew on it. So yeah, that's definitely a handy tool to have if you're working with a lot of sinew. Okay, back to our video now. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do the same thing on the sleeve. I'm just going to wrap this around, and I usually will do it, like I say, a couple times. Pull some of that slack out of there, and then you can wrap it around a couple more times, pull it really tight, and then I do it like 3 or 4 more times. So I'm wrapping anywhere from 6 to 8 times around there, and that usually gives me a nice white line. Now I'm making sure that the rest of my creases here are all still lined up, and then I'm going to do the same zigzag down the sleeves that I did for the rest of the dreamcatcher. I have the dreamcatcher on the front, I have the heart dreamcatcher on the back, and then I have the sleeve dreamcatchers here. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of scrunch up the rest of this tee, try to lay as flat as possible. Okay, there's the dreamcatcher tee. I'm going to set this aside to dry for a few days, and then I'll be back to dye it. Thank you for watching. Okay, we're back to get some dye put on this dreamcatcher. I let it dry way longer than I needed to just because I forgot about it. But anyway, so we got the dreamcatcher on the front of the tee. We have the sleeves tied up in the dreamcatcher pattern, and then we have the heart dreamcatcher on the back. So this here is really nice and bone dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my bottle of soda ash water here and just kind of give it a spray. And what that's going to do is help the dye soak in rather than want to roll off of the t-shirt. So I just give it a quick spray, flip it over, spray the other side. And that's usually pretty good there. And then we're going to start putting some dye on this. So what I have here is a purple that I mixed up from my liquid fuchsia and turquoise. So fuchsia was a little bit light, so anyways, I like mixing my purple that way if I want the edges to bleed out the light blue. So that's what I'm kind of hoping for in the dreamcatcher, is I'm going to dye these here, all 3 sections, solid with the purple mixed from the turquoise and fuchsia, and hopefully then some of that turquoise is going to bleed into the lines here, or it will leave the lines white. I haven't done a whole lot of dreamcatchers, so this is just how I do it. Lots of people probably have other ways of doing it that might be better than mine, but I've had lots of requests for it, so I decided to show you guys how I do it. So what I'm going to do is start out, I'm starting up here at the top. Remember, I did one band that was straight across, and then the others zigzag down. This one here straight across is the ring of the dreamcatcher. So for that one, I'm going to dye it a different color here. So I'm going to dye it in black just to kind of make it stand out a little bit, and that once again is just my own personal choice because I like to outline things, but you guys can dye it all the same color if you like. So as I put that on, I can see that the dye is wanting to soak in nicely. And the other thing, I don't always do it this way, but if you're having an issue with saturation, one of the things you can do is put the dye on just from one side and then use a cuticle pusher to kind of press that dye in just a little bit. That just helps it soak in further. And do a few dye sessions before you actually flip it over and put dye on the other side. I can see it's already soaked around there, so it's a little bit difficult with these tiny spaces, but if you try applying your dye from just one side, that might help your saturation issues a little bit. So now I'm just going to go along each one of these sections here and add dye to them. So I'm going to put the light color down first. So I got a bright green that I mixed up with turquoise and lemon yellow. So I filled up probably 3/4 or a little bit more of the bottle with lemon dye, and then a little bit on top of turquoise, and that gives me this really nice bright green. And you can adjust how much of the lemon yellow and the turquoise you use to make it either brighter, meaning more yellow, or darker green, meaning more of the turquoise. So you can just kind of adjust it how you like it. And just because of the way that I folded the sleeves out here, I do have this little bit of a pocket here of where the t-shirt's folded over. So it's always good to open that up and look down in there for any white spaces that you might see. So that way I can squirt some extra dye down inside there. Now I'm going to finish it off with some emerald green here. Just a coat over top. That gives me some texture. And there's the Dreamcatcher tea. I'm going to set this aside and let this batch for 48 hours, and then I'll have it for you in just about 2 seconds. Thank you for watching. Good morning, I'm MrTieDye, and we're doing another reveal video here. This is going to be for upcoming video. I've had lots of requests for the Dreamcatcher, so I decided to do a video of it. And this is the tea I made. So we're going to open this up, see what we got. Oh well, I didn't get a good enough saturation on that. Alrighty, well, let's see what we got here. Alright, let's open this thing up and see what we got here. So there's the front. Didn't quite get the saturation I wanted, but oh well. And then there's the back. We did the Dreamcatcher heart. And then on both of the sleeves, we did the Dreamcatcher design on there too. So that's what we've got here. And this one here is an adult medium. So we'll get this washed and I'll have pictures at the end.